Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another History of episode. It's unfortunately been quite a while since I've done a Street Fighter episode, but with Street Fighter 6 on the horizon, I thought that it would only be right to begin a countdown to Street Fighter 6's release with another installment in my History of series. This time, circulating around an all-time fan favorite, a sinister villainess and practitioner of Taekwondo, Juri. She is an antagonist like no other in the franchise, as whilst typically many frame her as just an evil version of Chun-Li, I think it does quite a bit of disservice with just how multi-layered she is as a character, as her vengeance runs deep, leading to the surface as this sadistic yet playfully cruel personality. But don't be fooled by that smile, because Juri as a character is one born from tragedy, forged in the face of vengeance, as a monster designed to kill another monster. She is truly a fantastic character, and a welcome addition to the series from Street Fighter 4 onwards. But with the absence of both Sin and Shadaloo, it not only raises the question of her future in the next installment, but how exactly did we get here? Well, today we will be diving into her background, her point of origin, her fall into darkness, as well as how exactly did she obtain the Feng Shui engine in her eye, as it is an extremely important tool in her arsenal. But as always everyone, if you like what we do here and you're excited to see more, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up as we all celebrate the hype train for Street Fighter 6. And of course, please don't forget to subscribe and tick that bell, as there will be new episodes each and every week. We get closer and closer to Street Fighter 6's release. Anywho, let's get right into things. Now, Juri originates from South Korea, being born into that of a rather wealthy family, as her father was a big-time lawyer that exclusively worked very closely with high-level authorities, persecuting criminals on an international level. Whilst the early years of Juri's life aren't well documented, only really being tapped into from the non-canon Udon comic book series, it is believed that at a very young age, that Juri grew up with a fond talent and interest in martial arts, adopting Taekwondo at a very young age. Life for her was relatively simple, but tragedy would strike at the age of 15, as Juri's father would take on an extremely high-level case, one which had him target the infamous crime syndicate, Shadaloo, looking to crumble their criminal empire. But all this actually did was put him directly in their crosshairs. So one day, Juri and her entire family would be kidnapped and executed by Shadaloo. Juri would be the only survivor of this attack, and all things considered, she was extremely lucky to have survived, as she lost an eye in the slaughter. Now at this point, something in Juri just snapped, seeing her wounded eye as an eternal reminder. Juri would swear vengeance against Shadaloo, and upon being released from the hospital, Juri would go on a brutal and grueling crusade for an entire decade to turn herself into the ultimate killing machine, weaponizing her Taekwondo to its literal limit, to which she would then turn her gaze on M.Bison. But this dark path she took, slowly but surely, began to chip away at her humanity. So by the time Juri does appear in the series, she is a sadistic masochist, taking any and all pleasure she can in inflicting pain upon others. But at no point in time did she ever lose sight of who was responsible for setting her down this dark path. And here is where things get rather interesting, because during that decade of training, Shadaloo would actually collapse during the events of Street Fighter 2, with Bison having been killed by the likes of Akuma. But that didn't necessarily mean the end of Shadowloo, because in its ashes, its weapons division, Sin, would take over from Bison's failure, now being led by the android Seth. Once tracked down by Juri, and having learnt of her terrible background, Seth would see the untapped potential in her. Knowing that the remains of Shadowloo still lurked behind the curtain, he would appoint Juri as his assassin, and to help her in her assault, she would be equipped with a tandem engine of her own. Having noticed her missing eye, Seth wanted to take her to the next level, granting her what would be known as the Feng Shui engine, an eye-sized version of his own tandem engine. This was a device that would enhance Juri to that of a supernatural level, making her faster, quicker, and far more dangerous than she ever was. And we really see this come into play during her Street Fighter IV OVA, as whilst she's hunting down Shadowloo operatives, she's able to dodge and weave between bullets, and even kick a rocket out of her way. So to no one's surprise, she is able to complete her mission. This chaos would not go unnoticed, as she would be confronted by her polar opposite, Chun-Li. But her sudden appearance only perks Juri's curiosity, wondering how the Feng Shui engine would stack up against one of the world's strongest fighters. Juri would engage Chun-Li in furious combat, trading blows with Chun-Li, who was surprisingly holding her own extremely well. But once caught off guard, Juri would capitalize on her distraction, delivering a thunderous kick that would incapacitate her. She was dead to rights until the eye implant malfunctioned, having taken it far beyond its limit. Having seen her allies close in, Juri would escape to fix her eye. Her assault doesn't stop there, because on her next mission, Juri would have to infiltrate a secret Shadowloo base, one that housed many of Bison's remaining dolls, physical beings that the dictator wanted to place his mind in, as the psycho power he wielded was tearing apart his body. Now, with Juri secretly knowing that Bison was still in fact alive, she would take immense pleasure in breaking each and every doll, rendering them unconscious and taking them to her ship. However, as this goes underway, she would be confronted by Guile and Cammy. Cammy would immediately spring into action, but can't quite get past the cunning mind of Juri, using her sisters as literal meat shields. Now, during this skirmish, she grows increasingly frustrated by the interference of Guile. So in retaliation, she unleashes the full power of the Feng Shui engine, delivering a kick to Guile that, by all means, would kill any normal man. With Cammy tending to his wounds, Juri is able to get away on her jet, but Cammy isn't quite done with her yet. Now, knowing what she wants, Juri would throw one of the dolls her way, forcing Cammy to catch her and fall off her ship. So by the end of the OVA, whilst she wasn't entirely successful, she knew that she had most certainly crippled Bison's options. So now, we can move on to the official events of Street Fighter IV, where a new global tournament is organized by Seth, as he seeks to hunt down the strongest fighters on the planet. So Juri would participate, not just to test her skill, but also hunt Bison and test the true capabilities of her repaired eye. Now, regarding the tournament itself, very minor details are actually explained on who exactly eliminated who. It's all largely left up in the air for interpretation. However, we do know that at some point, Juri would once again come into contact with both Chun-Li and Cammy. The outcome to these interactions are sadly still left unknown to this very day. There are also quite a few interactions between herself and Bison. However, again, due to the scarce nature of IV's story, we just don't know how canon this is. By the end of the tournament, and Seth's defeat, his broken body would be found by Juri, who reveals to him her own ulterior motives. That the android was simply a means to an end, and that she herself simply wanted to watch Bison and Seth tear each other to pieces. She thanks him for all of his help, before then crushing his tandem engine, leaving him for dead as she plans her next big step against Shadaloo. Between the events of 4 to 5, Juri does go at it alone, trying to pull apart Shadaloo from the darkness. But this only invokes the fury of Bison, who is able to tear out her eye implants, forcing her to run in defeat. With no Feng Shui engine, Juri is forced to return back to a dilapidated Sin base, recovering the other eye, and after doing so, runs into a mysterious woman by the name of Helen, the voice piece of an international secret organization, wanting her assistance in taking down Shadaloo. But before Juri can decide, they would be interrupted by Ed and Balrog. Interested in seeing what this eye was capable of, she engages the two in combat, fiercely forcing them out of the facility. She later on is able to infiltrate yet another Shadaloo base, fighting and defeating Feng, who is just about able to fend her off with his poison gas. Realizing that she could not fulfill her vengeance alone, she does reach out to Helen once more and joins her side for Street Fighter V's main story mode, A Shadow's Fall. During this game, Bison is able to rebuild Shadaloo back beyond its former glory, and with its status restored, Bison would craft what would be known as the Black Moons, weapons of mass destruction scattered across the globe. The world seemed in his grasp. That is, if someone hadn't betrayed him. The keys to the Black Moons would be scattered across the globe. Thus Bison would send out his remaining kings to track down the lost pieces. So this now takes us up to the story mode, where Juri makes her first appearance, making quite the entrance during Helen's summit, as she near immediately gets into a fight with an unprepared Rashid. Upon being broken up, it's here where they learn the properties of the Black Moons, and how obtaining their keys will lead to their downfall. So Juri would set off to Brazil to track down the Matsuda key, and upon arriving, she finds that it has fallen into the hands of Chun-Li and her allies. But instead of fighting them for this key, she sees chaos amongst them, as Cammy is once again distraught over the corrupted Decapre. She would rescue the two, taking them far away from the chaos. Even so, the peace does not last, as once the Capri awakes, Cammy is forced to render her unconscious, to which they are then ambushed by Vega. Not wanting Cammy to fall into his grasp, Juri would interfere in this fight and fend him off, eventually taking the former doll to Helen, to which she would then be recruited to their side. With all of the pieces now out of Shadaloo's hands, they would then wage a massive assault against the crime syndicates, with Juri taking unparalleled delight in each and every soldier she crumbled with her legs, even beating the likes of Vega alongside Cammy and Decapre. As this goes underway, Ryu would go on to defeat Bison himself for the final time. So the death of Bison meant the ultimate end of Shadaloo. So with the organization crumbled and its remaining kings scattered across the globe, Juri can't help but sit back and watch as the organization responsible for his suffering crumbles to nothing but ash. But of course now, what happens after this point with Juri? Well, honestly, it's actually kind of impossible to say. Street Fighter V doesn't really have much of an aftermath that discloses the fate and what becomes of her until Street Fighter VI. But with Shadaloo's fall, Juri has more or less fulfilled her desire to vanquish them, and with about 5 or 6 years having canonically taken place since Street Fighter V, it raises the question of, what has she been up to? What does she do now? And is she at all interested or connected to the mysterious JP, the new villain of the franchise and wielder of psycho power? What is his relation to Bison? We can only wait and see, especially with Street Fighter VI's very interesting approach to storytelling. So with all that said and done, that has been it for the history of Juri. I hope you have enjoyed this one, as it's been an absolute pleasure to come back and not just cover Street Fighter, but also make a proper history of episode. I've really missed making these, and I hope you all have enjoyed it. As you can see, whilst there is no doubt similarities between herself and Chun-Li, shameless plug, I do highly recommend checking out that episode. I feel like everything after their point of origin is kind of where their paths divert. Their endgames are the same, don't get me wrong, but the paths and journey they took to ultimately vanquish Shadowloo is really where the stories differ. With Chun-Li going on to become a police officer to take them down from the right side of the law, whereas Juri wanted to become the monster to kill the monster. It's a very interesting contrast between these two different personalities. Juri is a masochist in every sense of the word, but she's not quite so one-dimensional in that sense, clearly having a very playful and open mind when it comes to how she treats someone, friend or foe. So I'm very excited to have her return in Street Fighter 6. Up to what capacity, however, is where the big question lies. But for now everyone, that has been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and keep on fighting as we all eagerly anticipate the release of Street Fighter 6. Take care everyone, I'll see you all soon.